Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Brent Nextran, and today I'm going to be giving you a tutorial on how I color grade in Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro isn't a color grading software. Its sole purpose is not to color grade. It's to be a good editor. For a great color grading program, I use DaVinci Resolve. But for a lot of people, they don't have DaVinci Resolve and they're already invested into the Premiere Pro, Adobe suite. So it's kind of been a request from a lot of my friends on how to get better color coming out of Premiere Pro. So today, that's what I'm gonna do. So right here, I've got a project pulled up. And so I'm gonna go over to the screen record over here. And I've got me and my wife going over to a hike. We're driving over, and we got a lot of cool walking shots, a lot of cool kind of sunset shots over here. So I'm gonna go through and I'm going to add the correction LUT that Canon provides for my specific camera using, this is for Canon Log 2 in the Cinema Gamut profile. But there are many correction LUTs provided by a lot of manufacturers, and those are kind of a base, get you close enough kind of look. That way you can kind of finagle it to your liking after that in the grade. So that's what I'm going to apply right now. So I'm going to go to the color tab, and in the color tab, I actually use the creative LUT section to do a lot of my base grading. But I'm going to use an adjustment layer and get the creative tab filled right here. Find my LUT. Here we go. Okay, so I've got the Cinema Gamut Canon Log 2 to BT709 wide DR. So technically, this isn't actually the Rec 709 LUT. It's a wide DR LUT, which is what I like to start with, and it's a very, very pleasing highlight roll-off. Even in a 709 space, so it really compresses your highlights. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm going to do some kind of white balance adjustments. I don't like how much green there is in the skin tones right here, so I'm actually gonna pull in a little bit of magenta, kind of make those a little bit more neutral. And it was kind of a cloudy day, so there's a little bit of a blue cast. I might warm it up just a little bit. Just to give a little bit of life back into those skin tones and add a little bit of saturation. Similar thing to this shot, a little bit of magenta definitely help. And I'm using the waveform RGB monitor right here, and this helps me a lot when I'm just getting kind of a base look down. I will almost match a lot of the white levels as well as kind of the mid-tone levels to get a consistent look from shot to shot, depending on what the scene looks like. Same, add a little saturation, maybe warm it up just a little bit, and just a little bit of contrast. So I'm gonna do very similar stuff to a lot of these clips until I get to a different scenario with different lighting, because these are all shot inside the car, behind that glass, so that can reduce a lot of the contrast. Get a little bit more magenta in there, pull back a little bit. So this actually has a much higher contrast, so I might pull the highlights down a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty good. Okay, cool. So we have another scene right now. I've got kind of an outdoor scene, very green. I'll go back here. Okay, now I have a couple more shots outside. So for these ones, I'm just gonna go through really quick and color correct a lot of these. So over here I have a night shot. So it's kind of twilight, blue hour. Much more noise is gonna be showing up in this if I start raising the exposure. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do kind of a subtle grade. Pull my luminance down in my saturation. If I start to bring up the exposure a lot in post. And this is one of my Premiere tricks. If I'm doing grading in DaVinci Resolve, I'll actually add noise reduction to darker clips like this that have been underexposed. But there's no noise reduction built into Premiere Pro. So I'm almost done with these guys. So for this one, I am kind of pulling the sky down a little bit because I don't want the sky to completely kind of blow out her face, because her face is still the subject in this shot. So I'm kind of warming it up, making it just a little bit more lifelike, not as cold, because I want it to feel kind of happy and warm. And that's kind of my neutral tone I'm kind of going with for most of these shots. So for a couple of these shots, I actually overexposed them on purpose to get a more kind of bloomy look with the sun behind her. And I wanted to see how far I could really push the limits of the camera and shooting C-Log. So we can see when we pull it down, we hit the clipping point right here. So I cannot recover anything above that, no matter what I do, whether I shoot RAW, whether I shoot log, or Rec 709, the clipping point is still the clipping point. But I can kind of mask it by balancing the image out within its own contrast. We did recover some of the information in the sky, which is nice. Okay. Similar scenario with this one, overexposing it to kind of push the camera and get that really glowy, bloomy look. So for saturation, I just kind of eyeball it for a lot of stuff here. I like to push it to kind of have a poppy kind of look up until people's skin tones just get just a touch too orange, and then bring it back a couple of notches. That way I'm not overdoing the saturation, especially on people's faces. Okay, so this is a much more well-exposed shot. I really like this shot. I don't need to add as much saturation, as much contrast to really get the look I want in this shot, because the light isn't hitting the lens and bouncing around everywhere and reducing contrast. So this shot ends up being really nice just with the correction light on it. So it's pretty nice. So you go back and forth between the log image and the correction light. I really like that. So I like this shot over here. I'm definitely gonna add a little magenta into it. It seems a little green and a little cool. There we go. Making it a little bit more neutral. And then I'm gonna pull down highlights just a little bit and actually lift up the black point or the shadows. There we go. A little more neutral, not as crushed on the shadows. Okay. Depending on what I see in the waveform monitor is really what I target with the Lumetri color sliders. So if the waveform monitor is filling up the entire image, I might actually need to reduce exposure a little bit or reduce my highlight roll off, because I don't want everything to be so bright and so blown out that I lose all my detail in my image. But for a lot of shots like this, where they're already a lot more balanced, I don't need to do as much in the Lumetri sliders here. A little bit of contrast in there, a little more saturation, make it pop. And in the kind of creative section, I will add sharpening to some of these shots, depending on if I want to see a little bit more detail in there. There's a cool one. Nice backlit sunset. I like how golden it turned out. So right here we have a shot. It's much darker. The lighting's changed from the last scene because we're in complete shadow now, and we really just have kind of the horizon line and the sun, the really warm sun hidden through like all those layers of atmosphere. So I'm gonna grade this one a little bit different than the other ones. So for this one, I actually want it to feel a little bit darker. There we go. So for this, I added quite a lot of contrast back in there because it was very, very flat. And I pulled the exposure down just a little bit, and then I really bumped this saturation more than most of the clips to really have that nice warm feel with a little bit more contrast in the scene. When you add contrast, it actually changes because you're stretching out a lot of the color from its midpoint. It actually changes the way that the colors feel like they're saturating. Okay, so I'm gonna add a little bit of, okay, here's a really cool one. This was kind of like the kind of finale, very kind of inspiring, you know, running up a mountain sort of shot. And then for my last shot, this is a nice one, lots of smiles. This one's a hard one because her face is much lower on the IRE than I would like it to be. So I could fix this by adding a mask, and I might do that later in the grading process. Okay, cool. So now I'm gonna go through and add sort of a base color grade. So I'm gonna call this layer color grade. So I wanna find a shot that I really like. I think I liked one of these back here a lot. So I really liked this shot a lot. So I'm gonna use this kind of as the basis for my first grade here. Okay, so for a lot of my stuff, I actually like to lift and crush the blacks right here. So I'll actually pull this up, kind of give sort of a faded film look. So another thing I like to do a lot is I mess with the hues and these saturations. So for this guy, I wanna make the sky just a little bit more like cyan. So I'm gonna mess with those just a little bit. There we go, it's very subtle. It might not show up on video, but the blues just tint a little bit more towards the green hue. So I'm kind of changing the phase of the blue a little bit. And then I might pull up the saturation of that overall. So you can see I'm doing very, very subtle changes. I don't like to do really big drastic changes in the grade because I can always kind of change the intensity of them later. And I like to be subtle. Okay, so we're here. So I've got kind of a fun look going on using my red curves right now. I think I'm gonna keep that. I really like that. Kind of just a little vintage sort of look. And then right here we have our sharpening. So I'm actually gonna take everything in the image and up it by 25%, 25% for this sort of look. It's not necessary that I do that for everything always, but for this scenario, I'm just gonna do a base 25% sharpening for everything. So these are creative LUTs right here. There are a few that are okay. I find that most of them are way too extreme and end up looking worse. So I think one of the ones that I use occasionally is the codec one. We have codec, yeah, 5218, codec 2383. Let's see, which looks like two different film stocks. I'm not too familiar with film stock names, but here's a film stock that they try to emulate. The important thing to know is these are creative LUTs. They're looking at a Rec. 709 starting point and giving you their end point. But depending on what your starting point is, it's not gonna always be correct. So they give you the intensity slider, which is, it's a cool way to kind of give yourself, it's almost like an overlay of intensity. And for me right now, the look I'm going for doesn't really it doesn't feel as compatible with this one. So I'm not gonna go with any of these built-in creative looks right now. So the last way I kind of mess around with the color in here are the 3 color wheels here. So over here, I'm actually gonna pull in a little bit of cyan or blue into the shadows. And I'm gonna compensate that in the midtones. You can see what we're doing to the image. So it's still pretty blue. I might want to go a little bit less extreme on that. So the midtones is going to have a lot of facial features, but also there's quite a bit of shadow, especially up here and kind of down here. We get a little bit more shadow. So this is definitely going to affect those parts of the image. And then what I do on the highlights is I try to kind of balance the two, maybe in between, and try to compensate so nothing gets too cold or too warm one way or the other. I try to kind of stay on this axis. I find that with a lot of skin tones, leaning into magenta or green really brings out kind of a gross look in a lot of people's skin tones. And so I really stay away from that when I'm doing a lot of these 3-way color wheels, when I'm not qualifying someone's face. So I'm trying to stay on the opposing side of the wheel. Almost looks like a Western now. Here we go. What's the difference now? That's pretty extreme. Here we go. Okay, so this is definitely a more stylized look now. It's not gonna, I don't know, it's not gonna turn any heads and be like, whoa, what's wrong with the color? But it's definitely gonna give you, you're trying to get, an emotional response from someone. With your color grade. You want to kind of emphasize what's happening in the scene and really, I don't know, give them the feels. Yeah. Up the exposure a little bit. Pull a little bit of stuff out of here. It's important to go back and kind of check all of your looks and make sure they're really lining up with each other, because you don't want it to keep jumping back and forth between 2 different white balances or 2 different looks that really don't match. There we go. Open that. That's a good one. Good looking one. Yeah. Look away. So this one actually gets very purple. So this one doesn't really match. So in a final edit, I might not even use this clip just because it's so different on the skin tones. Okay, so compared to the base and the grade, looks pretty good. Okay, so for this last clip, I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna brighten up her face a little bit. So I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna add another lumetri. I'm gonna take this lumetri. I'm going to make a little face shape right here. And I'm gonna track that. Premiere is teaching me patience. There we go, so now we have a nice face track. I think I made it a little bit too big. And then I can actually affect the brightness overall. So I can make this look completely white or just completely dark. So I'm gonna go up and just brighten it just a hair. But you can see this is another advantage of shooting in a flatter log profile. A lot of the detail and exposure of her skin is still there, and we've just brought it down. That gives us a little bit more flexibility to bring it back up a little bit and add a little bit of saturation. So that was my color grading tutorial. I hope to do more of these with the more projects I'm working on. Don't forget to like the video if you liked it, and hit the subscribe button if you want to see some more content. I'm planning on doing some DaVinci Resolve color grading tutorials on basic correction and grading as well, and kind of the differences between this and Resolve, and how I will round trip them sometimes. So hope you liked the video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.